Hello. Welcome to E Squared Empowerment with Elysia. Today, I have the great privilege and honor of getting to hang out with my dear friend, Mandy Harvey, located in Colorado, one of my favorite states. It has fantastic energy there. And she is one of the leading experts in her field of trauma healing. And she works with highly sensitive, overwhelmed, overachieving coaches. And she just does so much to help honor the healing process and talking about how it impacts the body and going through and helping people to address scarcity and worthiness and visibility through her process of the 4 different steps of people healing in relationships to themselves, their body, the healing process, and their soul's purpose, and so much more. So Mandy, thank you so much for showing up and being on the show today. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor to be here. Hi, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, this is such an important topic, especially in this day and age, but trauma has been around for millennia, right? But how we are bringing forward our relationship to the conversation of trauma has definitely been more evolutionary, I feel like, in the last few years. What do you think?
For sure. Yes. There are conversations happening in homes with families or friends or even online that are more vulnerable than I have ever seen before. So I think that gives me a lot of hope and promise that so many more people are waking up to ways in which they can heal and shift the conversation, shift the trajectory of their life and the relationships they have.
That's fantastic. And what brought you to the space of wanting to be a trauma healer?
Oh my goodness. I avoided it for many years.
No.
I thought I had this belief. So I grew up through trauma. I always say I was born into trauma, and it just has stayed with me my entire life. And what that looked like, because sometimes people don't understand what does that mean to be born into trauma. I was born to a single mother. My biological father had abandoned us to go start a family with someone else. And so she was already in the state of depression. She had her own trauma from her past. And so growing up with her meant that she was someone who hadn't really seen her trauma or understood she even had it. And so she lived through her trauma, meaning she sought out partners who weren't the healthiest partners, who would often take out their aggression or be abusive to me. And so from a very young age till the age of 14, I really suffered a lot of the blunt of the abuse, mostly sexual abuse, and mental and emotional with my mother, because she was there sometimes, she wasn't there. So I grew up very in a state thinking it was just very normal, but I grew up very kind of confused about who I was and what love meant. And so as I became a teenager, my mother and her husband at the time, when I was 14, committed suicide. They took their life. And so at the age of 14, my entire life completely unraveled. And the precipice, what led to their them taking their own life, was that I had told someone at school what was going on and that I was being sexually abused. And it led to kind of events that eventually led them to just saying that it would be easier than going to jail, that this, they took their lives because of it. And so in that moment, I started to develop some very core beliefs that, one, I couldn't trust my intuition, that this decision I had made to talk to someone at school was the wrong decision. And I just should not trust myself to make any decisions for myself going forward, because it leads to catastrophic loss and destruction.
Yeah.
And so that was one belief that I had carried on into my adult life for many years. And then I also carried on with me this belief that I wasn't lovable, that people would leave if I was too much. People would leave if I started to be myself. And so I really started to hide and restrict kind of who I was. But in that moment, I started therapy, as you can imagine, losing your parents and moving in with a legal guardian and going to a different school. It just like everything changed in that moment. And I did the best I could to kind of process what had happened. But in those teenage years, in my high school teenage years, nonetheless, I was really processing a lot of grief, a lot of guilt, a lot of pain. And after a year and a half of that, of going to therapy every week, it was like I got to a point where I just couldn't talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
I got to a point where it just got so heavy. Like my body hurts. It hurts to wake up every day, not just mentally, but physically. It hurt to just, breathe. I was just in so much grief and pain at that point in time that I decided it would be best if I just wasn't here anymore, because all I wanted was to be with my mom. I was in this new home. I was in this new school. I didn't know anybody, and I felt so alone. And I felt like if I could just be with my mom, everything would be okay. I just, you can imagine as a 15-year-old, all we really want is to feel loved. And all we really want is to feel accepted. So there was one day at school where I decided, I had thought about it for weeks. I thought, okay, I just shouldn't be here anymore. I need to just be with my mom. And I had come up with this plan to take my own life. And I left school one day during the middle of the day, and I went to the grocery store and I bought a bottle of sleeping pills. And on the way back to school, I swallowed all of those sleeping pills, 30 of them.
Wow.
And, it was one after another. I can just remember it was like almost with every step, I was taking a pill, swallowing it, taking a pill, swallowing it. And as I walked back to school, I really don't remember getting back to school. The only thing I can remember is waking up, and I was sitting in like a commons area where there were a bunch of tables and stuff. And the thing that woke me up right before I woke up, I can remember feeling this sense of like warmth and this sense of like, I'm home. Like it literally, this golden warmth experience was just like the most amazing, loving. It felt like being in a home that is full of love, full of that loving energy that smells like chocolate chip cookies. And it's just got this sense of like comfort and love. And it was this golden orb, like it just was golden all around. And I was like, oh my God, I made it. Like I'm finally, I'm going to get to go good. I'm going to get to see my mom. I'm so excited. I could feel this energy. And all of a sudden I felt this hand on my chest and pressure, and I was being pushed away. And I heard, it's not time. And then I woke up, and it was the end of the school day, and the school bell was ringing, and all these kids were leaving and running down the stairs. And I can remember just sitting there like, what just happened? Like I was literally right there. Like I was there, and now I'm here. And I was like, I can't believe this. Like, I can't even be successful taking my own life. Like I got so angry and so mad. And I was like, why? It's not time. What? No, I don't want to be here. And that became the start really of my healing process. At that point, I was admitted to a mental hospital for about 12 weeks. And I was diagnosed with PTSD, and I was put on some medication. And every day for the rest of my high school career, I was in therapy, and I was healing, and I was doing the things. And I eventually, as I graduated high school, I graduated from therapy and was like, oh, great. I can live my life. I'm good. But the reality is we heal in layers.
That's for dang sure. I've definitely experienced that one firsthand. I'm like, yes. As much as it would be great to just get to like snap our fingers and be like, all right, I have my aha moment. I did the thing. I'm done. It's just like, no.
No, we heal in layers, right?
Yeah.
So
Currently going through another one.
Sorry, my dog's barking. We have someone coming in here. So anyhow,
it happens. Doggos. Because your dog wants to be on the show with us, it's totally fine.
Yes.
My dog goes on the show with us. You're like, hey, buddy. Trauma. We have our emotional support animals here, and it's always good.
So
we're focusing on our moment. Yeah, it's high school can be really hard. I mean, like that's a tremendous amount for a human being to have gone through, and I really appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that story with us.
Yeah, thank you. It's my story, and I understand. We all have a different story. We all have different things that happen to us, and just because my story is the events that happened to me are one thing, it doesn't discount your story or the things that you have experienced or someone else has. So even if you didn't experience, the sexual abuse and the suicide and the grief and the loss like I have, you've experienced something else. And it's just as valid because we all react to it. We all have a nervous system, and that nervous system we are born into either has, a certain capacity, and at some point, we will react to something and be able to handle it, or it becomes so overwhelming that we shut down. And that doesn't mean we're bad or we're wrong or we're, we haven't figured out how to be this like evolved human. Like we are actually, reacting because of the way our systems are built.
Absolutely.
And I bring that up just to say, I went through all that trauma healing, I went through all that therapy for 3.5 years. And, I thought at the age of 18, I was like, oh, I am done. I can move on with my life. I'm great. But the reality is, it was like every 10 years, every 8 years, something like that, something else came up and I would have to heal a little bit more. And then I'd feel good and I'd be like, okay, great, I'm good. And then something else would come up. And it was like, oh my gosh, like I can remember thinking at one point, when is this going to be done? Like, can I just live my life? Like, anyone else feel that way? Like, geez, can I just not have to think about this? And it's been through my journey of, it's been almost 30 years that I've been off and on in therapy, that I realized and learned a lot about my nervous system and my patterns and the programming that I had learned at a very young child to hide and to get small and to not speak my truth and to avoid trusting my gut or myself. And these were things that I carried with me into my adult life, that at some point I started to realize like, oh, wait, I learned to do that as a child because I didn't feel safe. But I feel safe now. I'm in a safe home. I'm in a safe environment. What's happening is I was holding on to those things in my body. My body still remembered. And what I love about trauma being more of a topic these days and talking about different ways to process and heal trauma is that we get to understand that our body is so intelligent and our body knows how to keep us alive. So it will compartmentalize, it will hold on to things, it will stuff them in places, that we don't have to deal with them. And then we get to a point in our life where we keep repeating these patterns, at least for me. And I was like, okay, I'm ready to stop repeating these patterns. I'm ready to stop hiding. I'm in a job where I want to speak more. I want to speak my truth, or I want to show up more visibly in my life. I want to, go after big dreams, but I can't do it when I feel unworthy, or I can't do it when I feel like I'm not enough, or I can't do it when I get so scared to speak my truth that I sweat through my clothes and I have to run away. Those were all things I wanted to conquer and be like, I'm done because I have a big dream. And it wasn't until I learned how my body was holding on to these traumas that were in my tissues, that were affecting my health, that, once I learned how to tap into my body at a somatic level and tap into my nervous system and process and understand how it worked and be able to heal it, then I was able to say, okay, yeah, I used to feel unworthy a lot, but now that I heal my nervous system, now that my nervous system feels safe, now I have a little bit more capacity to take a risk and to show up online or to, go speak at an event and, grow these skills. And so, I would anyone who's gone through a trauma or gone through a healing journey or process, I think, understands that there are layers to doing this. And there's a certain point where you hit a wall where you're like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And for me, I hit that wall and I was like, I don't want to feel this way. I want to feel happy and love my body and do all these things. And that's when I started to turn inward and start to build this relationship with my body and my nervous system. And that's really what,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, that's what catapulted me into doing this work.
Yeah, you said some really important things there that I just want to clear up for people who don't know particular words and how they work relationally. So somatic. So for anybody out there that doesn't understand what that word means, can you just break that down?
Yeah, sure. So somatic essentially is your body. And there's a type of trauma healing. Let me pause there for a minute. There's a type of trauma healing called somatic experiencing, and of which I am a practitioner of, but essentially it helps you tap into and connect with your body and understand how is your body holding on to the trauma. So we are bottom up creatures, meaning we hold our brain gets more our signals from our body than our body gets from our brain. So when we start to process and heal trauma, it's important to get to the body level, to get to where we're holding it in our body and start to build that relationship and heal it from there versus our head, because we process certain things in our head, but we process a lot more in our body.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. As a massage practitioner over the years, I've occasionally had people who have what we call emotional releases. Which for anybody out there that doesn't understand what that is, it's when, so it's like your muscles hold memories, like basically what Mandy's talking about right now. Yeah. And so at times when you release the muscular tension, the emotions are also released. And so a person can start laughing hysterically for no reason, or crying spontaneously for no apparent reason, or just have an overwhelming feeling of whatever emotion was trapped in that particular muscle. And so you go and get a massage, and sometimes, you're just relaxing and things are releasing and toxins and stuff like that. But every once in a while, you hit something and it's really profound. I personally have experienced an emotional release. One time somebody released my psoas muscle, which is a muscle that connects in the low back anteriorly in the front into the hip. And I just spontaneously started crying for no reason. And I mean, it's a muscle that's typically painful to work on in general, but that was not the reason I was crying.
Yeah.
So that was just a really, had I not personally experienced that or had clients on my table where I had facilitated that, I would have thought it was pretty woo-woo and
I agree with you. I can share an example that I had with a client where this was, in fact, our first session working together. And I can remember we had prepped and she, kind of gave me some ideas on what she was hoping to accomplish in the time that she was working with me. And I remember our first session, she was like, I don't know, I don't have anything coming up today. I'm just kind of feeling tired. And she kept making this movement with her arm. And so part of what I'm trained to do is notice and observe how people are moving and what are their tendencies in their bodies as they start to talk, because they become unconscious to us. We talk and we do things and we just don't even really pay attention. Well, as she was talking, she just kept making this movement with her arm. And I was like, I'm curious if we can, I'm noticing you're making this movement, like you're just kind of trying to stretch or do something. I'm curious if we can just slow that down for a minute, because she was kind of doing it quickly. And when we do something unconsciously, we're not paying attention to speed. We're not paying attention to motion. So she slowed it down, and I explained to her, slow it down like you're watching one frame after another in a movie. So you want to see the frame, see the next frame. And so she slowed it really down. And immediately it brought up a memory of her as a young child being chased by dogs. She was on her bike and she was being, chased by these dogs. And so she was on her bike, and this movement came because she was turning her bike to switch around on a road to get back home. And it brought up this process for her that she needed to move out of her body and release. And it wasn't necessarily the dogs behind her that was stuck. It was this experience of feeling fear and getting home and not having anybody there to help her regulate and feel safe. And so this movement, all of a sudden, as we slowed it down and allowed the nervous system to really guide us, allow the body to guide us, it brought up something that she was really holding on to that she wasn't aware of.
Yeah, no, that's really fascinating. I'm glad that you brought that up. Because so much of it is unconscious that we work with, right? In trauma, and the nonverbal communication that we're giving people, and the energy that we're putting out, and like the mixed messages. And that's why I think it's so fantastic to work with people like yourself and body workers, so that we can come into that space of awareness, right? And having humility and grace, and being able to be like, okay, like I might have something that I actually need to work on that I'm not recognizing that other people can see. Or maybe it's just like not something that people that are laymen can consciously articulate to you that you need help with, but they're still feeling the impact of that experience.
Yeah, totally.
Right. Yeah.
There were so many times in my life as an adult, in fact, where I just felt off in my body. I just felt a lot of tension, but I didn't understand why or where it came from. Like I have autoimmune diseases. And so I automatically have to be more in tune with my body, because I have to be careful with what I eat and, how much stress I take on and that kind of stuff. But before I really understood why I was kind of feeling these ways, like I just can remember just always feeling stressed and, always having tension in my shoulder over here. And it was, a place where I held a lot of stress and pain from my past, but I didn't know that until I started to go through my own healing, and doing it from a somatic experiencing method.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Have you done work with breathwork facilitators? I've been seeing more with people processing somatically and having releases from trauma and engaging with the breath, which makes a tremendous amount of sense to me, since so oftentimes when we're in that fight, flight, freeze, that it is impacting our breathing. So when we come into a place that's more regulated and healthy with our breathing, and expansive breathing into our diaphragm, our ribs, like breathing in, like we have imbalances. People don't realize that you might be breathing more focused into like the left lung versus the right, or into the diaphragm, or like like your belly, whatever. It's really fascinating. So what are your thoughts or experiences with that?
Yeah, so I'm not trained to incorporate that, but as a somatic experiencing practitioner, I do pay attention to breath. And so when I'm working with someone, if I notice that their breath is shallow, or, they take a big, deep breath, or I pay attention to that, but I try not to interrupt their process if it's in the middle of processing an experience or an emotion or an event, because oftentimes that breath is that way because that's what they experienced in the moment. And so for me, I allow that to kind of happen. But as soon as they take a deep breath, that's my sign that, they've started to process and move past it. And so then we will stay there for a minute, and I'll say, oh, you just took such a wonderful breath. How did that feel? Felt good. Feel better. I feel like I have more space in my body now. So I don't necessarily use breath intentionally, but I do pay attention to it so that I can facilitate and allow whatever process is happening to happen, or encourage something to happen.
That's really cool. It makes a lot of sense to me, because also with horses, like we look for that as well, for the exhale, for the licking and chewing, for the processing. I'd also like to say hello to Elysia. Thank you and good morning, my friend. It's always nice to have you here. Feel free to pop on the Zoom if you want, as always, to ask questions. So there's so many different things. There's one thing that I really want to ask you about, especially since you started the front about being born into trauma and how your mom was like living through her trauma with the partners that she pulled in. So there's this concept of trauma bonding that we hear about sometimes, but I'm not sure that people necessarily understand what it is that is. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of my experience, at least with my mom, I can use that as an example. You know, she was really living from, she had not even processed her childhood, which was very traumatic. And she grew up in a home where her father was no longer there. It was her mom, and her mom had boyfriends who were very abusive, and kind of just saw this repeat over time. And as she grew up, that's what she understood to be normal and safe. And so she attached to partners who really were abusive and treated her in a certain way because she was used to that. She saw that growing up as a child, and she thought that that was unconsciously that's what she was attracting, because that's what felt safe to her and to her nervous system.
Right,
And
because
so,
she recognized it, right? So the
yeah,
bond through recognition and
yes.
comfortability, even though the comfortability came through a standpoint of dysfunction.
Exactly. Yeah. And in fact, there was one time where she did end up marrying someone who wasn't abusive. And I can remember him. His name was Gary. He was amazing, lovely guy. But they ended up divorcing. She could not stay in that marriage because it felt so uncomfortable to her. She didn't know how to be a self-contained, strong entity in that relationship because he didn't need to treat her poorly, and she didn't understand that. And so eventually she remarried. But yeah, that's exactly the case where you're really attaching to someone or to an experience because of your past trauma is really kind of guiding your brain and your experiences in that way.
No, that definitely makes sense to me. So in regards to that, that brings us to your love methodology that you
Yeah.
created that helps to heal those childhood wounds and restore people more to their authentic sovereign self. So tell us a little bit more about what love methodology is. I feel like the basis of where it came from is pretty clear from your intro, but yeah, tell us more.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I've been in therapy off and on for almost 30 years. And in my trauma healing process and my recovery process, there have been times where I've been with someone and when it felt like we were making progress and we were healing and it felt good. And there were other times I was with people where it felt kind of re-traumatizing and not so good. And I'd get triggered and I couldn't stay in that experience. I would quit I would quit therapy because it felt so triggering and uncomfortable. And so when I really started focusing on trauma healing, I wanted to find work through a process that didn't re-traumatize someone, because we've been through enough. We know our story. we know what is upsetting to us, and I didn't want to create another experience where we feel like healing equals re-traumatizing or healing equals painful. And so this process is birthed out of love for ourselves, love from me to the person I'm working with. And it's an acronym. And it's 4 steps. And it's actually the 4 steps I went through when I really started to make progress on my own healing. And it happened fast when I started to really commit to it and use it over and over again. And I was just really amazed after so many years of talk therapy. All of a sudden, I was healing from my body level. And it was like layers and years and things were just shutting off. And so this is kind of where it was born out of. So love is an acronym. L stands for listen. So we often have thoughts and beliefs, and we're full of thoughts in our head all day long. Some of are conscious, some of them are unconscious. And if you're like me, maybe some of those are a little bit negative towards yourself, like, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. Why can't I just, make this decision and do this big thing? Or why am I still stuck in this relationship? Or why can't I lose the weight? Or why am I always sick and tired? Or whatever it is. Sometimes those thoughts are negative. And so L stands for listening to the thoughts, the beliefs, the fears, the doubts. they all have a root. But until we start to listen and understand what's coming up, we can't really find the root cause of it. So it's all about just understanding, what am I thinking on a daily basis? What am I feeling? O stands for observe. So observing where you hold that thought, that belief, that feeling in your body. So we don't feel things in our head, we feel them in our bodies. So if I'm thinking I'm unworthy, that might show up for me as a tight chest and feel really heavy every time that something happens and all of a sudden I feel like I'm worthless, or like, gosh, I can't do anything right. Maybe that shows up as a tight chest or tight shoulders or a bloated stomach or pain in my hip. Wherever that is, you're going to observe where you hold that in your body. V stands for validate. And this is often the hardest step for many people, because we might have grown up in a home where we weren't validated, where our feelings weren't validated, where we might have been told, stop crying, or you don't have anything to cry about, or, go to your room and come back when you're happy, or, we might have been, maybe that was just how they grew up. Maybe our parents just didn't know any better. That doesn't make them right or wrong, but it does mean that those experiences did create a stamp on our experience. And that means that we didn't really learn how to validate our own feelings and emotions. So validate in this process is all about, okay, I have this belief that I'm unworthy and I feel it in my chest. So now I'm going to validate that. I'm actually going to put my hand on my heart, on my chest here, and I'm going to say, I hear you. I hear why you feel like you're so unworthy. I see you. I see you right here in my chest. I know this is so painful, and I love you. Thank you for telling me. And then you're going to say whatever else you want to say, like, you are so worthy. I see you. You're not alone. I'm here with you now. Whatever it is that you feel like that part of you really needs to hear, you will say that to yourself when you're validating. And then E is embracing yourself in love. So asking that part of yourself, what do you need right now to feel safe, to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel loved? Maybe that's, I need to, wrap myself in a cozy blanket and just feel like I'm being hugged. Or maybe it's needing an actual hug from a partner or a friend, or maybe it's hearing, you're not alone. I'm here with you. And you would say that to yourself. But you're going to ask that part of you, what do you need? And you're going to give that to yourself. And this process can be quick. You can move through it in 4 minutes, or you can stay with it, for longer, whatever time you have. But this process, repeated over and over, when we start to meet those parts of ourselves that we're holding in our body, that hold those deep wounds, that hold those deep pains, when we can meet them, validate them, give them what they needed that they didn't get, they start to heal, and they start to step away from needing to control the experience. And then your core self really can step forward and start to lead from confidence, from worthiness, from love, from compassion. But it starts with having a loving experience with those parts.
I really just love that. I do. I'm like, no pun intended, but also,
yes. Yes.
No, I really do. And it's also very validating, because it's very much an experience I am currently organically having. Having come back from my really long trip, I was gone for a month and traveling across the country. As I barely missed you coming across Colorado.
Yes.
And yeah, and I think it's important to acknowledge that it's not just our relationships with self and others from the standpoint of romantic relationships, which I think people oftentimes think, especially in this conversation, but also how you want to form your environment business-wise, if you're a business owner.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
Because I think that oftentimes we don't take a step back and give ourselves permission to do that, and have the belief that we can create a life that we actually enjoy, create a life where it's purpose driven and meets us on a soul level, and that we can feel seen, and we can tap into the really beautiful talents that each of us as individuals have uniquely, to provide the world that meets us in a joyful way. Like, we can play and we can be abundantly successful, and we can be on purpose and seen, and honor that, like, we are sometimes messy,
It
right?
can, it should be, it can be, and it should be both and, meaning, I've had this experience in the past and it has colored my vision or, stained the lenses I look through the world, but I am also healing and I am also welcoming in more love and more joy. And I'm open to feeling something different.
Yes.
We can have both of those. We can have the sadness and we can have the joy. We can have the pain and we can have the vibrant energy. We can hold both of these experiences, but we can hold more of them if we are learning how to navigate our nervous system and build those internal relationships and healing within ourselves. Then we will definitely have more capacity to hold both.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, like, you can be both competent and healing.
Yes.
I think it's important for people to recognize that we don't have to be perfect to be able to functionally facilitate things in a space of authenticity and integrity to help others.
Sure.
But I think that's why being really honest with yourself and holding the boundaries and communicating things and being able to refer people when you do hit a spot where like I'm still in process here and I'm not going to be able to meet you as well as I feel like this person over here can and what I feel like you deserve. So we can stay over here and have support networks over here. And that's why you just don't let your ego get in the way, your expectations that you can do everything. Healing, the process of healing. There's so much to do there. And also there are so many different modalities, speaking of which, as we refer people to facilitate the healing process. And finding a person that is the right person can be kind of a tricky experience. So how do you what advice would you give to people who are trying to heal unresolved trauma, but don't necessarily know what that process should or could look like, and what red flags maybe they need to pay attention to within themselves or practitioners they're trying to work with? What would your advice be there?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And one that I can certainly relate to because I've seen so many over my own healing journey years and I've done different things. I've done talk therapy, I've done EMDR. I've also done somatic experiencing, and there are many others out there as well. I think when you embark on your healing journey and your healing process, first and foremost, I think we have to shift our expectations of like, I'm going to find the one person and they're going to do and help me do all these amazing things. And
they're going to fix me just one time.
They're going to, yes. Just, I'm going to go and it's going to be amazing. We're going to, I think Brene Brown was the one that said this, but I can remember watching an interview with her and she was like, I needed to go to therapy because she was writing one of her books, and she realized she had some unresolved things. So she goes to see her therapist and she's like, all right, so I have this one thing and I would like to just talk about this one thing and, get it resolved in the next few sessions and we'll be good. Right. And
I listened to that audiobook. It's a great point. It's super funny. I love the way she delivers. If anybody's not familiar with Brene Brown and you like my personality, you should definitely listen to her because we're very similar.
She's awesome, but I loved her honesty about it. And I think so many of us really enter into healing in that way of like, all right, I'm going to find the one person, they're going to fix me and I'm going to be good and it's going to be done in like a week, right? We'll just like clean this up and we're good. And that's not how it happens. In fact, as we mentioned, healing happens in layers, but it also happens in its own timeline.
Oh my God.
We cannot force it. Yes. Annoyingly so, right? We can't force our healing. We can't force it to happen any sooner than it's going to happen. And so I think we have to, one, reshift our expectations of the length of time, the process, and really be open to exploring and having curiosity in the process. Meaning, if you go see someone, don't expect that they may be the one that's going to help you uncover everything and heal everything quickly. I think we have to be open to the idea that we might need different people or multiple people, or that person might not be it. You might have to find someone else and you might have to try again. And I know that therapy can get a bad rap because maybe you go to a bad therapist and you're like, no, not doing that again. But the reality is we all, just like when we have friends, just like when we have intimate partners, or, just like when we go find a doctor, we may not find the right one, the right fit, the person that matches our needs. That first time, we have to be open to trying different modalities. And if we're going to have that compassion and that curiosity, then we also have to kind of stay true to ourselves. So we know when something feels good to us. We know what that feels like in our body. We also know what something feels like when it doesn't feel good to us.
Yeah.
And we have to listen to that when we go on a healing journey. I can remember there was a part in my process where I was having flashbacks to the sexual abuse I experienced as a child. And so I decided to go back to therapy. The therapist I had gone to prior to that was no longer available. And so I saw a different person. It was a man. And I can remember instantly not feeling comfortable, but feeling guilty about wanting to cancel and feeling like I was obligated to continue. And so I forced myself to go visit him and go through this therapy session with him weekly until I got to a certain point where my body was like screaming, like, no, this isn't good for us, And so I would just say, listen to your body's reaction when you work with someone, because your body will tell you whether you feel safe and comfortable or whether it doesn't feel right for you. And healing cannot happen unless you feel safe.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And I really appreciate you sharing all of your stories in that regard. So speaking of the healing space, what advice would you give to people to help create a healing space for themselves?
Yes. Well, I love looking at your environment. So that doesn't necessarily need to be your physical environment, but it should. So your physical environment, and your internal environment. So your external and your internal. I think it's important that we all have a safe place in our environment, whether that's in your car or whether that's in a corner in your bedroom or whether it's a closet. It's so important for you to have a safe space to process your feelings and your emotions as they come up and feel like you are 100% able to just let them out without anyone else judging them or criticizing them or questioning them. That safe space really has to be a sacred space for you. And it can look however you want to look. I mean, there was a period in my healing journey where I was being triggered by my husband, and we obviously were in the same home together. So it's not like I could just, claim a certain part of the home and be like, this isn't yours. And so
Couldn't?
I was like, I felt guilty for asking for that or for requesting something like that. So I would go to my closet and I would just use that space to cry and to process emotions. But I think it's important that you have someplace externally in your home. Also, I think it's important that you have friends or family or other support systems in place to help you process things, because we are social creatures. And we are born kind of like kangaroos. We need to have connection to feel safe. And so when we are processing things, especially maybe traumas from our past, we need to have a supportive, compassionate, loving adult who can co-regulate with us and help us process that experience.
I love that. I'm just smiling because I went on a couple dates with a guy like earlier last year, and he talked to me about something called kangaroo care, and I had never heard about that. And it was like when we would like lay naked just to have the skin to skin contact, to have that energetic exchange and that nurturing, just like a Joey has the skin to skin with its mom. And that's why it was called kangaroo care. And I was just like, I love that. And I never heard it before. And so when you're like, yeah, we're like kangaroos, and I'm like, yes, like kangaroos.
We need that. We need that love and that warmth and that safety. Yes. And then internally too, the love process is one way in which you can start to build a safe space internally. But I think learning your nervous system, learning what rooms in your home you feel the safest in, or learning the places that you feel the safest in, whether that's outside your home or in your car, learning the people who feel the safest to you, learning the creature or comfort creatures that feel the safest to you, blankets, or, the kinetic sand, or, things like that, helps you start to learn your nervous system so that you can amp up more of the safety and help your nervous system learn how to stay in that space and kind of eliminate some of the things that feel unsafe. So that it's really important when you're healing. Like I said, that healing happens only when we feel safe. So the more that we can create an internal environment and an external environment to foster that, the more that we will be able to heal.
No, that's really beautiful. And those are all really excellent points. Yeah, you're welcome. So for me, it's driving away from the city. So that's part of the reason. And like, I've driven across the country 9 times. People are like, do you believe in planes? Like, why are you always driving? And I'm just like, I love driving because that's my interest space. It's my safe space. It's when I'm able to be introspective, when I'm out on an open road and there's all this beautiful landscape and I am just like deeply introspective and in process, and it's just great. And so
for me, it's nature.
Yeah,
I love going on hikes. And so when I was on my healing process, like intently, now I feel like I'm in the phase of like maintaining good things. But when I was in the space of like processing deep trauma and healing, I would make sure I'd go, there was a place I would go hike that was just like my beautiful, sacred, loving place that I just felt so safe and comforted. So I would make sure I'd go there once a week and make sure I had time to really anchor in, and I'd sit under a tree for a period of that time. I'd go hike a little bit, sit down and look at the scenery. And I just made sure that that was a part of my routine and my experience as I was going through that. And I committed to that. And so I'd say, for anyone who's on their healing process, find those things that really feel comforting and supportive to you, and see if you can find a way to commit to making them a part of your routine on a regular basis. Yeah. Not just to have a little bit of fun and laugh and light the mood, right? Instead of, being in the space of healing all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love being in nature and hiking. Like, that's one of the things I am very grateful for as a business owner, that I legitimately carve like 2 hours out of my day to, and sometimes like it's in the middle of the day. It kind of depends on the weather and the light, right? Yeah. And I will go hike or bike, or sometimes it's just quiet time for myself to rejuvenate. And sometimes it feels like we don't necessarily have that amount of time. But the amount of efficiency that you get back in your life and the mental clarity to be able to, when you take that time, is infinitely more productive in the long run than pushing through and just being like, go, 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 go. And being stuck in the trauma loops that come up sometimes when you get triggered over the course of your day, instead of just being like, you know what? My brain just isn't working right now. And so I'm going to turn off my phone and I'm going to get in my truck and I'm going to go and I'm going to hike and I'm going to reset, and then I can come back and I can be functional instead of just spinning in the stuff all day long. And then you're just sitting for like 6 hours and you haven't really gotten anything done, and you're more tired and you're more pissed off and you're more just like, honoring the whole process is super important. And maybe you're super busy and you really don't have more than 15 minutes, but like take those 15 minutes, go put your feet in the grass, go stare at the trees or whatever.
My gosh. So the last 6 years, for about 4 of those, I was in the depths and the deep healing, really healing a lot of things for my body. And at the time I was still working in corporate America. And so I had a 9 to 5, and, it was one of those like meetings back to back to back to back. And then you had all this work to do after you did your meetings, and it was just chaos and crazy. And, this like rapid fire of stuff coming at you all day. And I was learning how to rebalance my nervous system at that time.
Uh-huh.
And it was interesting because I would be given opportunities, I think, from the universe to be like, oh, really? Are you learning how to do this? Let's just test you. Here's a day at work that's going to really see how well you're going to, work with it. But I was literally like the oddball out in my office because I would block, 15-minute increments a couple times on my schedule. And I would literally go outside, have, with everyone wearing their business suits and their corporate clothes, I would be sitting outside in the sun with, my eyeballs closed and the sun really hitting my eyes, because that's helpful for your circadian rhythm and your hormones. But my feet would be out of my shoes in the grass. And I would just be sitting there, like listening to some nice calming music, taking some deep breaths. And I know there were quite a few people who walked past me going like, who is this wackadoo? But I can tell you, I was more productive in my job when I did that than when I didn't. And I was flustered and stressed, and I would get a bloated stomach because I would hold my stress in my stomach. And just by the end of the day, I'd be a wreck, and I would come home and I couldn't be the greatest mom or the greatest partner because of it. So, it's all right. Embrace the fun, unique ways that we can really help to boost up our ability to show up the way we want to.
No, I really appreciate you sharing that. It's so, so very important. I feel like we could totally do like a 2 and 3 part session to this, but we only have a few minutes left. Yes. So we have a couple of things. One, really quickly, I feel like we've kind of like danced around and we've touched on this a little bit, but we wanted to talk about how you gain emotional freedom. So I feel like what we just talked about is definitely part of gaining emotional freedom in that inner stability and calm. But is there like one extra thing you would like to give people as we're like kind of in closing on that particular point?
Yeah, I think the lesson to take away really is that it's not rearranging things on the outside of our life that's going to make this permanent impact and give us the capacity to handle life and do all the things and grow the business and be the best person that we can be. That's not the key. The key really is rearranging things on the inside, helping heal the things on the inside that we've held on to for so many years, shifting how we, shifting our relationship to our emotions, shifting our compassion with ourselves. It's shifting those things that's really going to give you the ability to gain that emotional freedom. Using tools like the love methodology are one of the ways in which you can start to shift those internal things. But it's really focusing on the internal that will always shift the external environment and the experiences and give you the capacity and the energy to really go after the life you want.
That's fantastic. I love all of that. And where, my friend, can people find you? Like, do you have anything going on right now? Where can people find you for coaching, etc.?
Yeah. Thank you. So you can find me on Facebook. I'm Mandy Harvey. You can find me on Instagram. I'm Mandy L. Harvey. I'm also on TikTok, Heal with Mandy. But yeah, just when you follow me on socials, you'll get a lot of great content from me in terms of how to just go through life day in day, healing certain things or becoming aware of certain things, processes, resources, and tools. You can connect with me on socials. If you are interested, I am running a package right now of 4 sessions where you get a discount on those. You actually get 4 sessions for the price of 3. So if you are interested, these are 1-hour sessions. Feel free to, just connect with me, DM me through Instagram or Facebook. And I'd love to set up a call, or if you're interested and not quite sure what you want, you can always just set up a free call and we can chat about it. But yeah, outside of that, I also am on multiple podcasts and talks. And so I'm always highlighting those so people can hear more about my story and my experience and can follow the journey through that method as well.
That's fantastic. We'll make sure to put some links underneath and later and whatnot, we'll be able to put it up in different spots. And so Mandy, in closing, we always have the same question. So who inspires you in the world today?
Oh my gosh. I would say the name that comes to mind right away. So I'll just there's many people actually that are inspiring me these days, but the one that's coming up for me right now is Glennon Doyle.
Ooh,
So she has a book called Unbroken, or sorry, not Unbroken, Untamed. And she has a podcast, and I love her process and just her writing and her view into how we heal and process things, and that her kind of thing with the untamed community is all about, we can tend to tame ourselves, in certain ways, and once we start to untame ourselves and see who we really are and live life authentically, things can really shift in beautiful ways. And so I love her inspiration and her message and her view of life. So that's who's inspiring me these days.
I love that message to be able to end off on too. So thank you so much for sharing that. And it's just been such an honor and a privilege to get to hang out with you today and to share your wisdom with the platform. And man, yeah, it's been fun. So thanks for being on.
Thank you. I've had such a great time.
I'm really glad. Well, and thank you so much for anybody watching now or in the future. And hopefully you'll get to hang out with us in the future and maybe hop on yourself or being interviewed or just hopping on to ask questions. And if you're interested in doing any coaching with me for the empowerment coaching, and then please find me at www.globalequineaffiliates.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at Elysia Buss. And then of course we have the YouTube channels, Horsepower, Empowerment Through Connection, and Global Resources for Men. So until next time, oh wait, I almost forgot to tell all of you. So we are starting in the women's group, for Phoenix Rising Women's Group. We have support groups on the second Tuesday of the month at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the fourth Tuesday of the month. And we will be having Elizabeth Hollis on Tuesday, May 10th at 8 p.m. She is a business coach, and she's going to be talking about being a mompreneur, imposter syndrome, self-care, and like Mandy talked about today, the balance of the inner world and the outer world and how we come into balance with our authentic selves. So until next time, everybody, we will see you later. Bye.
Bye.